Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing horror discussions, bringing you the best thoughts, theories, and literary analysis this side of Insidious. And that's where I want to start.
Okay,
because
cool.
The Woman in the Yard, this is our contention for this episode. I think The Woman in the Yard is the best movie Blumhouse has been a part of since the first two Insidious films.
I think you're so right. This movie was such a surprise. I remember seeing the trailer and thinking, okay, that looks like a fun, like, run-of-the-mill Blumhouse horror movie, sure. And then we weren't even going to see it because we had a lot of other things we were seeing, and we were like, But then we saw one review. One tweet that had said some really great things about it. And we're like, you know what? Fine, let's go. And then it blew us away. I'm so excited to talk about this.
Yes, so we want to keep with that central tenet of why is this the best movie with the Blumhouse tag on it since the first Insidious. Back up that claim, and I think we have 3 reasons why here.
Perfect.
So,
are we going to spoil this movie?
No.
Okay.
I will gesture at things, and I'm going to talk about the topics that it talks about, but I'm not going to spoil the plot, and I don't think you are either.
Great. Yeah, I don't plan to. Awesome.
So the first reason that I think both of us loved this film and connected with it so much is because of the family drama. Mm-hmm. It's not that it just has family drama. It's that it's relentless and bold, to the point that the films I would compare it to, the films and shows I would compare it to, with the level of depth and sincerity it brings to this topic, would be like The Shining, The Haunting of Hill House, and The Boogeyman,
what about
which
the
we loved
Hereditary
from
too?
A few years ago.
Yeah, I felt there was a lot of Hereditary in there as well.
Yeah.
No, I think you're so right.
And those are all glowing comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
There's even a moment here where the mom, she's kind of stuck in a room. I'm trying not to, be oblique here, but
sure.
She's hiding behind a wooden door. And it reminded me of Jack Torrance in The Pantry.
Yes.
At the Overlook, but not in a derivative way.
No, yeah, all of these like connections and reminders in there did not feel derivative. They more felt like this is a natural, like, evolution of horror. Like these are the roots where it comes from, and this is how we get to this.
It's the intensity and the sincerity, because when I think about Hill House, I think about sincere melodrama. Mm-hmm. And we talked about The Boogeyman, the Stephen King adaptation with Sophie Thatcher from a few years ago. We talked about that over on our Patreon, actually, $2 a month, support the show. We loved that was such a genuine, fresh navigation of the grief horror subgenre. And that sort of transitions into the second reason that we liked the film so much. It's because it's such an unflinching negotiation of tough topics, like grief and regret, but also, I think more poignantly, depression and even suicidal ideation. Mm-hmm. And it hits those things in such... I already used the word unflinching, but it's the fact that the film goes further with those topics than you're expecting. Yeah. And as you're adjusting to that, it goes further again, to the point that when it flashes the hotline after when the credits are starting to roll, that feels earned, because I can't remember a film, especially a grief horror sort of film, going as far as this one has with those topics. It's gone farther than anything I can remember seeing.
You're absolutely right. And we've said before on the show and just in real life, in the podcast of life, we're so tired of grief horror. Like, Hereditary did it amazingly. A couple of other things have done it well, but like The Babadook, right? That's kind of like the first one. But it's gotten so old, and it's been done so, poorly and in a subpar way.
In this
so
modern
often.
era. The Babadook kicked it off in the modern era.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm not saying that's the first one ever, but no, yeah, you're right. So
just trying to cover your ass there.
No, I appreciate that. Sometimes I say things and I'm like, I really should have like qualified that. I just like say stuff. That's just what a podcast is, I guess. Just saying stuff.
Classic case of saying stuff.
But we've gotten so tired of that subgenre, and whenever a movie does it well, it's a beautiful surprise, and that's why we were so excited about something like The Boogeyman a few years ago. But this, I think, is the first one since then that's done it so well, and I think even better than The Boogeyman. I loved The Boogeyman. I think it was a great movie, but I think this tackles that topic even more, like even better. It's
interesting because when I say something like this film goes further with these themes than I've seen in any recent horror movie, it almost invites a question of like, what does that mean further? Does that mean shock value?
Right.
Does it mean it's just presenting it in a more dramatic or upsetting way?
Or more explicit way.
But the reason it was so effective and upsetting for me is that it was always ringing true. It always felt like a sincere, relatable, I don't know, I related to a lot of this
Me too.
as a navigation of these topics. It felt like just kind of soul-bearing storytelling, to the point that I would compare it to another work of art that we haven't had enough chances on the show to bring up, and that is the graphic novel, the sort of graphic memoir from Zoe Thorogood.
Oh, yeah.
It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth. And that, even superseding what we're talking about here, that goes further with these topics than I've ever seen any work of art in any medium, to the point that I was constantly marveling at it. To the point of, and I mean, look at what we do here 2 times a week, and, you know, in the podcast of life. I was constantly thinking to myself when I was reading that graphic novel, I didn't know art could do this.
Oh, yeah.
And in terms of grief horror films and this sort of subgenre that's really calcified over the last 10, 15 years, I didn't know this subgenre could do this in film. And I think The Woman in the Yard is a massive step forward there.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. And it doesn't like overdo anything. It doesn't feel exploitative or like overly sincere or like saccharine ever, or like over the top. It's very intense. It's a very intense experience watching this movie, but it doesn't feel like it's doing too much. It feels incredibly respectful and also unafraid at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not just torturing the characters for the hell of it.
Yeah, right.
It's to serve a larger point. In the same way, It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth, the surrealism of that book serves the mental health aspect.
Yeah.
Serves the emotional turmoil. And I always thought the imagery and the fear and the horror, the horrific aspects of The Woman in the Yard, I felt like it always served the subtext.
Me too. And I had said this to you right after we had seen it. I said, you know, the first like half hour, I was not so super sold on the movie. I wasn't not enjoying it, but I was, and looking back now, I think I was misunderstanding it or just not quite.
How do you mean?
So there's a lot of stuff early on in the movie where it does this thing that a lot of horror movies do, where like the sound design is really, really intense, and like a lot of sounds are really loud, and like they're jumpy, and there's a lot of like false jump scares. And at first that felt cheap to me. Like, oh, they're just like adding this, like sprinkling this horror in there because you're worried your movie's not scary enough. But looking back at it now, and as we're talking, I'm thinking that was more reflective of the ongoing fear and paranoia that our main character, Ramona, is experiencing. Like, even before the scary shit starts to happen, this isn't a spoiler, but like there's this fear inside of her that's there, has been there the whole time. And I think having that, like those elements of like the weird little jump scares, makes a lot more sense now. Like, it's little things like that you're right, the horror elements are all perfectly contributing to the larger story that's being told. It's not just scary for the sake of being scary.
But it does that, it serves that larger idea without explaining itself. Like you're saying.
Yeah, it doesn't
later.
explain itself. Exactly. Like, at first I was like, ugh, okay, cheap. But now I'm like, oh shit, I get it.
Because you see these moments of Ramona disassociating and remembering this brutal car accident she was in. And you can piece it together after the fact, even after the movie has ended, that of course her senses are going to be heightened.
Yeah.
And that's why she's having this almost startled reaction to everyday things.
Right, exactly.
And the sound design serves that, but in a quiet way. And that's the third element I wanted to play with here, is that this is real scrappy indie horror filmmaking. You can tell there's no budget, but I say that as a compliment, because this film so openly embraces those budgetary constraints in a way that always feels like a creative limitation. It doesn't feel like a budgetary restraint. It feels like a creative limitation, to the point that I found myself thinking about the White Stripes, who I've always loved because they put creative limitations on themselves. How many pieces can go at the same time? Just guitar, just drums, all of these boxes they put themselves in. And that economy of craft, or here the economy of storytelling, that thriftiness, it makes you create solutions. Even if it makes it feel like you're putting the limitation on yourself, to the point that I don't have to think about things like budgets. And this film was creating something so simple, so potent, so elemental, so universal.
Right.
The big CG, there are a couple of CG shots that I'm sure were a big portion of the budget.
Yeah.
But the effects I remember from this movie are like a flashlight was freaky.
Right. Or there's a shadow, you know?
The work that this film does with shadow is unbelievable.
And mirrors too. I think some of the more expensive shots are like where like it's like you're possibly looking at a reflection and you don't see the camera, you know? Like those were really well done and very creative.
Exactly.
They weren't just like, oh, cool mirror, freaky, there's a thing behind you in the mirror. It was like, it was creative and interesting and surreal, like you're saying.
And the things that freak you out the most, the image that sticks with it, I'm going to try to refer to it abstractly.
Okay.
The thing that freaked me out the most in this movie was achieved purely through editing. It was just surreal editing, and it's the shot with the pillow.
The pillow.
The knife with the pillow.
Oh, God, the pillow.
That's just editing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's just good editing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of economy I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Of weaponizing all of these necessary elements of the craft to serve the story.
Totally.
The fact that the whole film is within a single location with just a few actors. These are always the things that make a script more filmable.
Yes.
But it doesn't feel cheap. It feels like a chamber play. In the same way the central conceit of there's a woman in the yard, we don't know who she is, and I think she's coming closer. That is such a simple premise. In an elemental, universal, timeless sort of way, it reminded me of those classic Stephen King premises.
Yes.
It's just a what-if question.
Yes, that's what his best stories are these like, except for It, which is kind of a totally separate thing. But like,
But we've talked about what if scary dog?
Yeah.
What if clown?
what if clown bad? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What if woman in yard? Yeah, exactly.
What if car alive?
And I loved it too in that like this is something that you see in something like Midsommar, where almost the entire thing takes place during the day and it's like daylight and it's like very warm and sunny, but it's still so scary at the same time. Like, yeah, I was really impressed with that.
For any of this to work as well as it does, you need to have a really smart script. You need to have a thrifty, crafty director and really strong actors. And luckily, this film has all three.
Yes.
This was just, for me, this was rock solid horror. The kind that leaves you devastated on the walk out of the theater and even on the ride home. The kind that kind of tilts your cinematic world on its axis a little bit. I don't know what I was expecting for this film.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt bad that it slipped through the cracks for us. But Woman in the Yard hits like a train. I think this is a major work of horror and arguably the best horror movie we've seen so far in 2025.
Absolutely. And it was also like very scary. Like because there are some horror movies and like, you know, stories that do a great job. Like the script is great. The characters are good. The messages are fun, but it's like, okay, but that wasn't really scary. This was like, I'm at the point where I usually am not all that scared when watching a movie, or I can deal with it. But like I was like closing my eyes. Like I was very afraid during this movie.
It's because of that first half hour. I mean, we've talked about this in the context of The Exorcist as well, where you spend a lot of time sincerely setting up or family and relationship dynamics to the point that it's scary because you care about them and you don't want them to get hurt. It's not this simple shorthand of half the slashers you walk into where it's scary because someone's going to die and, hey, I don't want to die. It's more than that.
Right.
It's about these specific characters.
Because in the slashers, you don't really care that the dumb blonde is going to die because she's not helpful, important to the story, you know, but this is different.
And as much as I was scared here, I spent most of the rest of the time like fighting back tears because my eyes are small and I didn't want to miss anything because there was that quick kind of surreal edit and I didn't want to miss a frame of this. But it was that balance between emotion and fear and sort of every time it let the gravy touch the potato, like every time it mixed those things, it was so potent and so effective.
And that's the thing that something like The Haunting of Hill House does so well. And that's like, I think that is like in the top
of course
5, maybe 3 of like horror film projects for me. Like I think it achieves so much and is so brilliant. And this was reaching some of those levels here.
It was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And honestly, this is one of those films that just reminds me of why I love horror.
Yeah, me too. I know, because then we were talking about it with my parents, and they were like, "We're not going to see it. Tell us everything." So we were explaining it all, and I was like explaining the metaphor of it all, and for me, it was like, well, yeah, of course, there's a huge metaphorical element to this horror creature, but like most people who aren't into horror don't really think about that. Like they just think, oh, like horror is like about things are scary and that's fun. And I was thinking, that's what is so great about this genre is like it is a really creative way to explore really big and beautiful and meaningful ideas and topics and themes through this really like in this really creative way. And I love that about this
because
genre.
when you hit them head on, when you hit them without that veil of metaphor or surrealism or horror, any of these other phrases we're using, it can start to feel saccharine. It can start to feel like you're just torturing characters for no reason. I mean, we talked about this honestly when we saw The Iron Claw. The fact that that's a true story, that this family's just systematically decimated through this decade of just unfiltered tragedy, to the point that they had to cut out a few of them.
Yeah, they actually didn't do all of it.
because it would have felt unbelievable in a film.
Yeah.
I think that veil of horror lets you punch straight through at these ideas to the point that it hits harder for me. I don't know. It's the fact that it's slightly indirect. It means that it's somehow more punishing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, and it's elevated and escalated and, you know, extremified through this intense,
also
horrific
poetic.
Experience. Yes.
Sorry,
yes.
but also it's the way. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but the shot, that moment with the penguin at the end hit me as hard as any of the reveals or moments or callbacks in Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
And for this type of horror, that's the highest compliment I can give.
Yeah. So definitely check this one out.
Please do.
It feels so unassuming in its marketing. Like it seems like very run of the mill, and it is not.
It could have been marketed better.
Yeah. It's very, very special. And I mean, I loved being surprised by it. That's a nice feeling. But yeah, I couldn't recommend it enough. This was fun to talk about.
Thank you very much for listening. Check out the Patreon. We already mentioned $2 a month. You can support the show, get a lot of other horror, including endless breakfast buffet roundups where we've talked about classic and new horror.
Well, let me also promote Lemon Tarts in Space, Cam's latest book. It is a light...
It's also sad.
It's also sad, but it's also fun. It's a light sci-fi, dark comedy. It's about cancer and space and lemon tarts and all of those things and how they connect. You can read it as a regular book in your preferred format, paperback or ebook, or you can listen to the audio drama, which I think is the best way to experience it. Cam does star in the audio drama, as does our good friend of life and the show, Tristan. I also have a little cameo in there if you want to check it out.
Ridley Scott's Alien by way of Monty Python. It is the funniest cancer comedy you will read all year.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be back in just a few days with another brand new episode.